So to start things off, let's take a stroll down memory lane. Tell us about the young Dr. Richardson. I know that you're from Alabama, and we'll just start from there. Tell us about your parents, what brought you out here to Colorado, and we'll just go, so on and so forth.
Actually, I was born in Georgia, but my
Oh.
parents are from Alabama.
I see.
Yeah, they grew up in Alabama, went to
Mhm.
college in Georgia.
Mhm.
They went to Clark, and my mom had me while she was in college.
Indeed.
Yeah, I'm the second of 6,
Mhm.
and we always asked our parents, how did we end up in Colorado,
Mhm.
coming from Georgia? We just didn't see why they would leave Atlanta.
Yes.
They never gave us a straight answer.
Oh.
But they came in 1962.
Mhm.
And it was just before I started kindergarten, and we.
How was that move for them?
Well, I guess they thought it was great. We had no relatives out here,
Mhm.
and I thought it was kind of strange. But they came out here. My dad had an opportunity to work at the YMCA.
Mhm.
They were very popular back then, so they packed up. I think there was 4 kids at that time because 2 of my siblings were born here in Colorado.
Yes.
But so there was 4 of us. They came and. We moved in. I don't remember our very first neighborhood. I know we lived at the YMCA for a while, the one downtown.
Mhm.
I think it's the one that's still there. And then we moved into our neighborhood where I grew up through high school
I see.
over on Olive Street.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So what did your father do for the YMCA?
Well, he started out as a physical education director,
Mhm.
and then he became the executive director after a number of years.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so.
I see. And what type of neighborhood? Well, how was the neighborhood that you all lived in? Was there any discrimination faced from your dad's side as professional, or was there anything you experienced in your neighborhood?
Well, when we first moved in, the neighborhood was mostly white.
Mhm.
And I recall my dad saying that people wanted to know what was his credentials to move in the neighborhood.
Yes.
But they noticed that he wore all white to work every day, so they wondered what he did. And he's like, well, what are their credentials that live next to me?
Mhm.
We were one of the few black families, and suddenly it seemed like the neighborhood was changing over. Our parents had to describe that, of course, because I was pretty young. But I had a friend, my mom likes to tell the story of my first white friend in the neighborhood, and
Yes.
we used to walk to school together. But shortly after we moved in, all the neighbors started moving out, and it became an all-black neighborhood. So after a few years and in through high school, it was mostly just a black neighborhood. Not just, because we enjoyed it, but it was all black after the first few years. And
Understood.
it was family, it was home, but we started being bussed out of the neighborhood. So it was really kind of a strange existence in a sense.
I see. Are your parents still in this neighborhood?
No, they moved my junior year in college. They moved to Southeast Denver. But we spent all of our happiest years there in the neighborhood.
I see. I see. Now, speaking of academics, you are an extremely, extremely intellectual woman. You're a doctor. You're very, very accomplished. Let's just touch on your academic career, especially from high school going on to college to receive your MD. What situations or what stands out mostly as roadblocks or social roadblocks that pretty much try to prevent you from becoming the woman that you are today?
Well, I was saying that we were bused, and I attended George Washington High School. And of course, back then, high school started your sophomore through senior year. And they had changed the boundaries, and it was right around the time when busing was occurring, and there were a lot of tensions that were rising. So I remember my sophomore year, they had us on split session, so there wouldn't be too many the black students there at the same time. So I actually went from 12 to 5, which wasn't so bad because I liked watching the soap operas.
Yes.
So I got to do that, and actually it was pretty uneventful. I mean, we rode the bus in. I didn't get really all that involved with a lot of school activities because it just didn't really feel quite like home. But I did some of the activities like National Honor Society, but most of my activities were after school and at the Y and other more community-based organizations. But I remember my senior year when everyone was happy about being accepted to college. Some of my classmates were upset because they said she got into Stanford and this person and that person wanted to go to Stanford and she took their spot. And I was wondering, how does one person take like 10 people's spot? And there were several other people that got accepted to Stanford too, but they thought I had taken their spot somehow, and that really was kind of disheartening to me to think that some of my classmates that I thought were really kind of friends in some sense, school friends, really weren't friends at all. So it kind of did something to me. But I said, hey, you know, I'm not going to be stopped. I had some supportive teachers. I had one counselor that wasn't very supportive. He didn't want to give me the scholarship applications, but our parents over the years had said, if you have any problems in any environment, come and let us know. So my parents were fortunate. Fortunately, they came to the school and said, hey, let her have the scholarship. She should be able to apply, and I ended up getting at least one of the scholarships that I applied to that were some of the bigger ones. So those are some of the times that I remember. And I went on to Stanford and had a great time there.
That's awesome. That's really good. Now, switching gears, we're going to come back to the academics, but going back to your parents, what would you say is the biggest influence? What would you say is the thing that helped you the most growing up to not only be, you know, not only do bigger and better things, but to also make them proud of you? I see that you were involved in the community at the YMCA growing up. They just seem to have their hands in you growing up a lot, especially with volunteering. What else would you say helped you contribute, or what else did you contribute to growing up while living with your parents?
Well, my dad was a good philosopher. He always had lots of philosophies. He always said, work hard.
Yes.
And the thing I think I liked best about both of my parents, Loretta and Bill Richardson, was that they were proud of who they were. They were from Alabama, but they never were real negative about the experience there. They said, yeah, there were the colored only, or white only, and the colored signs, but they didn't let that constrict them. They really talked about being proud of who you are as a black person.
Understood.
Not putting down other people, but being very, very proud of who you are, and not being ashamed and not pretending that that's not part of you. And so I grew up with that, and also the work ethic, work hard. If you can't be the tree, be the bush. It'll be the best little bush you can be. My mom would always quote these. I think it was Edgar E. Guest. She was always quoting those things. So we kind of thought, oh, some of this stuff is a little silly. But then as you go on and you grow and mature, you realize that a lot of good things were told to you. And definitely I still hold a lot of that stuff dear as I've moved through my life. I mean, I learned a lot. Not knowing, I was like, what do parents know? You know how it is, but they really did know quite a lot, and I appreciated what they imparted to all of us.
And it shows, for sure. Now fast forward, back to your academic career. You received your undergrad, so what was the fire, what was the initial spark that ignited your interest in practicing medicine?
You know, I laugh and I tell people I wasn't one of these kids who in utero I knew I wanted to go into medicine. It wasn't until my junior year of high school I had a teacher, we called him Mr. T, for anatomy and physiology. And he was a great teacher, and I thought, hey, I like science, maybe I should become a doctor. And I thought of it just that very simply. And I was always a person that once I decided on something, it was hard for me to switch and change. So I went into Stanford. I entered Stanford with a thought that I'd be a pre-med and I'd go on and become a doctor. I really didn't know much about it. I didn't know what type of doctor. I just knew that this was something that I wanted to do. And when I entered Stanford, about half the class was pre-med. But then it seemed like after the first quarter, we were on the quarter system, after the first quarter, half of that half had dropped out of being pre-med, and I thought, oh, maybe I should be doing something different. But I didn't really know what else I should do. It just seemed like it was part of me and what I should be doing in my life. So I stuck with it.
I see. Well, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people out there that are glad that you stuck with it. That's for sure. Did you, while in school, are there any incidences that stuck up where people, you know, would look at you? I know that you mentioned earlier that there were people that were disheartened or angry even that you got their quote unquote slot. But did you experience any other discrimination throughout your years of practicing medicine where people were just, you know, coming to you saying, why are you here? You know, was there any point, I guess I'm trying to say, is where you just wanted to throw in the towel and just move on and do something else? Or was that never in the equation? You had the determination to continue on and obtain your MD?
Well, I had the determination. I always said there's light at the end of the tunnel. I knew what my path should be and where I wanted to get to. But in college, I really didn't face anything. I mean, I had a great experience there. I had some fun. I was with some African Americans or blacks that were proud to be intellectuals, and I thought that was refreshing. And in medical school, there were a few instances, but what really sticks out in my mind is during my residency when I think in like my second or third year of residency, having some patients say, who is she? She seems pretty sharp. Is she from America? Or I don't want, specifically saying, I don't want a black doctor working on me. And I remember one time a guy said, you know, I don't want a black doctor working on me. And I said, well, you know, this black doctor is the only doctor here tonight. So if you'll have a few choices. Either you can die because you don't want a black person to take care of you, or you could live and have this black person take care of you because I'm the only one here. They're not going to call in anyone else.
Yes.
And that was upsetting to him. I don't recall what his answer was, but at that point I was like, I'm not going to worry about this person. I have the same training. I've done all the prerequisites. It's up to him. People have choices in life. I haven't done anything to demonstrate that I'm not competent, so it's up to him.
Understood.
So I didn't worry about it too much at that point.
Now, when you hear things like that, what goes on in your mind? I mean, is it something you get desensitized to, or is it something that will always be under your skin? Whenever you hear those words, I don't want a black doctor taking care of me, well, I mean, how does that sting? How does that feel for you?
You know, it always makes me feel just bad. It kind of makes me go back to younger years when I felt like I had to suppress myself a bit because teachers would say things like, well, if she can do it, then everybody should be able to do it. And as a young person, you don't quite understand that, but it's kind of stood out as maybe they don't want me to achieve, and they're seeing me as different, and there's a reason why me as a person shouldn't achieve. But my parents had always instilled, you know, you do your best, you keep going forward. But it always stung me when people would say, I don't want someone black. I said, but they don't know me. Know me for a person and say, I don't want her because she's not good. Not just because simply because I'm black.
Yes.
And that always disturbs me. And even nowadays, I don't see quite as much of that, but occasionally, you know, I'll hear things like, oh, that colored person or whatever. Even in these days and time, that kind of strikes me, and I have to hold myself and say, okay, let's not react. You know, there's probably reasons. I can be a little bit more patient, a little bit more thoughtful about how it makes me feel.
Yes.
When people use words like that or say they don't want to have a black person working on them, it still strikes me, but not as hard. Because I say, you know what I know. I know the training I've had. I know that if people give me an opportunity, that I'll do the best that I can. I may not be the best. I think I'm pretty good. But if you give me a chance, then you'll see what I can offer you rather than just making an assumption. But I don't really let it bother me as much. I mean, it used to really disturb me, and I'm like, that's not fair. You know, I've gone through the same thing as everyone else. And then now I have to, you know, deal with this sort of thing.
I see. Now, speaking of your professional career, have there been moments or instances where promotions have been withheld, or once again, those the glass ceiling, so to speak, you've reached the glass ceiling and you can't progress any further because of your skin color or the way that you look, or because the higher ups or your superiors don't want to promote you simply on the basis of your skin?
No, actually, I kind of almost had the reverse of that. Once I received my MD degree and I started practicing, I never felt like people wanted to keep me from achieving higher heights. I was encouraged to go into administration, which I'd never really thought about. I thought, I think taking care of patients is really a passion, and that's what I love. But I was working at Denver Health, and they encouraged me to apply for the medical director. And I'm like, ooh, I hadn't thought about administration. I don't know if I'd be any good. But there was one of the fellow workers there, a white doctor, that said, hey, you know, I want this job, and they only want you because you're black. And I just was thinking about this, and I said, well, you know, in America, if you were great, they wouldn't even be considering me. So you need to look at yourself and not look at me for your problems.
Understood.
So I applied for that, and I got it, and really had a great time with it. I was progressing very quickly, gaining lots of power, which I was like, I'm not looking for power. I just want people to work together. I want to work with the people that have made this clinic what it is. But eventually I saw that I had developed a little too much power. And my boss, I came back from vacation one day, and they had abolished a position of the medical director at the clinic. And they hadn't discussed this ahead of time. I'm like, well, what happened here? I went on vacation, came back, there's no longer a position. They said, well, you know, we need to restructure, and that happens a lot in healthcare where things are restructured. I said, okay, I see. And then I took another administrative position. I was still doing the medical, taking care of patients, but this was kind of, I call it a sideline job because I still was primarily focused on taking care of patients. But that happened, but I had another administrative position. So it was interesting. I'm glad that I did it.
Yes.
I didn't feel that I needed to. To me, I had reached my goal. I reached the pinnacle for me when I became a physician. Others have things in mind. They thought there were many more things that I could do or should do.
Yeah.
But for myself, I thought I've become a doctor. I've kind of made it through. I've reached the light at the end of the tunnel. Now I can just go on and take care of people and do what I do. Yeah, kick back on the beach, play a little golf.
Exactly. Now switching gears again, this is an issue that even chaps my hide sometimes, but in the black community, especially among young black males, there's a certain type of stoicism that goes along with being a black male. It's about not showing emotions, joy, or sadness. And African American males actually suffer from a lot of depression. What are your thoughts on the lack of outreach or community outreach to these black men, not having anyone to talk to and keeping all of these emotions bottled up inside? Do you think that there should be more of an outreach to these young males, to someone to talk to and realize that their street credit, quote unquote, won't be jeopardized if they reach out and try and seek help of some sort?
Well, I think there's stigma just in general in the black community around mental health issues, and then the black male, the perception of what makes you a black male, and you have to be strong. I mean, you hear this a lot, you have to be strong, and so a sign of weak, you can't cry. You certainly can't seek mental health.
Yes.
So I think that there needs to be more of an effort to outreach. It's going to take a campaign. It's going to take years to work on this. I think Brother Jeff is doing a great job now addressing mental health in the community. He's got a series of events that are going on, but I notice he doesn't have one specifically for the black males. Maybe that will come later. He's done women, he's done general, he's done women, he's doing the children and youth. And hopefully he will get to the men, because our men need help. Our men need to be able to understand it's okay to cry, it's okay to seek out help, to talk to a therapist. You won't lose your manhood.
Exactly.
That's what it's all about, is like, am I still gonna be a man if I reach out, if I show any sign of weakness that I'm depressed? But the black man has had a lot of stresses throughout our history. If you think about the most feared person in America, the black man. Now I'm talking Terry, that's my opinion, is the most feared man in America is the black man.
An educated one.
And an educated one. You say, we talked about this before, but an educated black man sometimes is even worse. You know, to take that subservient role is what was most desired, because I believe that the world knows that the black man is very strong and has a lot to offer the world. But sometimes our men don't believe that. I think there's post-traumatic stress from our history, deep in our history. There's a post-traumatic stress from some of the environmental things that happen, driving while black. I mean, I think that affects the black men much more than other groups and much more than women. You hear about the young men driving around Aurora. You know, are you in a gang just because you're driving around in Aurora and you happen to be black? These are the things that play on your psyche.
Going back to education, it's also stigmatized for, you know, many African Americans, especially in the community, when they say that they're educated with a degree and such. How would you feel would be a very good, an effective way of going into these neighborhoods saying, hey, look, you know, it is okay to be educated. It is okay to want to rise up and go above and beyond and achieve great things. Do you think that there is an outlet or some sort of way to communicate this? Do you think that educated African American men or women should suppress their education, or do you think they should go out there saying, hey, look, I achieved X, Y, and Z. If I can do it, then you can do it? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think people should suppress their education, but the truth is it happens. Even when I was in middle school, I didn't want people to know that I was quote unquote smart. And I remember my dad coming to school. For some reason, I didn't get my report card one time. And my dad picked it up and he came, oh, you did great. And he was showing, we were in the lunchroom and he was showing everyone. I'm like, Dad, why did you do that? I mean, I was just kind of there. And I think I've heard from some young black kids that these kind of things are still going on. They don't want people to know that they're smart, because maybe you're a sellout, maybe you're no longer black. So I think it would be great if we get some of our black, educated blacks to go out and say, hey, you know, I'm still black as you are. I'm educated. I can still be me. I can still maintain my culture. Because I think some people think you have to give up the culture, you have to give up being black in order to be educated. And I think that that's a misconception. But I think we need people to go out, people that are kind of viewed as community heroes, to go out and say, hey, I have my MA degree. And we were talking about that earlier, about a young man that's very prominent in the community, and most people don't know that he has a degree and 2 degrees, because then he loses his street value if people know that he's got degrees. So I think we're going to that's another area that we need to work on.
Things are
people
getting better.
Reaching back and saying, hey, I'm educated and I'm still real.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. Now, you are still active in the community. I'm pretty sure the viewers, of course, would also like to know you are volunteering, and you have a few organizations that you're working with. Could you explain what these organizations are and what exactly they're going to be doing, or what they do in the community as far as outreach is concerned?
Yes, I have my hands in lots of pots, as you well know. And one of my major and favorite organizations right now is the Colorado Black Health Collaborative. And it truly is a collaboration and partnership with community groups and individuals. Our major focus is health, of course, is embodied in our name. But we also want to cover not only African Americans, but blacks, and really from childhood all the way up to, we'll say, the grave, covering health-related issues. We have health forums quarterly. We also have a resource directory that we put together. And you're probably wanting to know kind of what my role is with that
yes,
group.
Chiseling away.
And so, you know, I have to kind of go back to the beginning, if you don't mind.
Oh, not at all.
Because to me, it's kind of funny. I mean, I do a lot of volunteer work, and I was asked to be on a committee to help plan a cultural event for the African American community in 2008, to find out what their view was on health and what some of the issues were in the black community. So I agreed to join a planning committee. They said this is going to be a one-time event.
Yes.
Terry, all you have to do is get on there and help us plan a cultural event. So we planned a family reunion.
Yes.
That's what we called it. It was just like a family reunion. We had food, we had drinks, we talked, and we had entertainment, and then we got down to business and talked about some of the health issues in the community. So the community said, we're tired of people coming in, getting the information, writing your reports, and riding off into the sunset. We want to continue this process. So everybody said, great. The person that was the lead in this said, oh yeah, we'll continue with community, we'll do it. But then she looked to us and said, you guys on the planning committee, are you willing to carry this forward? So we formed Colorado Black Health Collaborative after a bunch of meetings. I was one of the first persons on the board. I'm still on the board. I was on the inaugural board, and I'm the vice chair.
Yes.
I also chair our Health Access Committee.
Yes.
I asked people who wants to chair the committee. Nobody wanted to. They said, we want to be on the committee, we want to do work, but we don't want to chair the committee. So I'm the vice chair of the board, and then the chair of the Health Access Committee.
Nice.
And we're action oriented.
I like it.
We like to do work.
I like it. I like it. And is there a way that people can people just Google the organization, or is it easy for people to join and get active and get involved? Does it serve as a pretty good refuge, I guess, for African Americans trying to find their place and wanting to contribute back to the community?
Oh, definitely so. We take students that are looking for projects.
Hint, hint.
Hint, hint. And the community is welcome. We are very action oriented, and we have a number of programs that we do. We don't just sit back and, I don't know if I can say this word, I'll skip it, but what I usually say when we're sitting around at meetings and not accomplishing much, I don't really have time for that. So anything I'm involved in, we have to be doing something active. So there's lots of programs. We have a barbershop salon program. We have a networking committee that helps get the information out in the community around health-oriented activities.
Understood.
We're trying to really form and get stronger our youth, our young college and young professional group, getting them networking and being a support system so everyone doesn't leave Colorado.
Understood.
So we have lots of areas that people can get engaged in and be involved and hit the ground running.
I like it.
You can walk too, but running is what we usually do.
I like it. Well, it sounds like you have an excellent blueprint laid out for this organization and where you are now and where you're headed. Well, on behalf of myself, Dr. David Jackson, and MSU Denver, I would like to thank you so much for your time, Dr. Terry Richardson. And thank you all very much for watching.